Hey there, book lovers and self-improvement enthusiasts. Welcome to the WizBooks podcast, where we explore ideas to transform habits, boost productivity, and gain fresh perspectives. Get ready to dive deep, learn, and be inspired. Today we're tackling Cal Newport's DeepWork, Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World. We'll uncover why focusing deeply is like building a mental muscle, why even quick distractions can totally throw you off, and most importantly, how you can actually carve out time for this kind of work in your own crazy life.
You know what's really striking is how much more valuable deep work is becoming, especially in our current economy.
Okay, I'm all ears. What makes deep work so valuable these days?
Cal Newport argues that we're in an age where intelligent machines and what he calls superstars are really thriving. They're the ones who can produce unique value that can't easily be replicated.
So it's about being able to do something that a computer or AI can't just do better faster.
Exactly. Think of Nate Silver, that statistician who became famous for predicting election results with crazy accuracy. He was able to do that by going incredibly deep with huge sets of data. This is what sets him apart.
Right.
Silver's depth of work let him create insights that others just couldn't, and those insights had real impact.
That makes sense. So it's not just about being smart, it's about how you apply that intelligence in a focused way.
Right. And it's this ability to work deeply that is becoming a crucial skill if you want to stand out and really excel in today's world.
But here's the thing. Newport also says that even though it's so valuable, deep work is becoming increasingly rare. How can that be? It seems counterintuitive.
It's a real paradox, and to
Yeah.
understand why we have to look at what Newport calls the metric black hole.
A black hole. Okay, that sounds intense. What does that even mean?
It's the idea that the true impact of distraction versus deep focus is really hard to measure. We all know distractions cost us time and energy, but putting an exact number on that cost,
Yeah.
that's much harder to do.
So if you can't measure how much those distractions are hurting you, it's easier to just ignore the problem, right?
Precisely. And we end up defaulting to what's easiest, even if it's not the most effective. Think about those countless meetings that could have just been a quick email.
Oh, yeah.
Scheduling a meeting is simple and measurable. You can point to your calendar and say, look, I got this done. Measuring its true impact on your actual goals. Not so easy.
That is so true. I think we've all been in meetings that felt like a total waste of time. But this whole deep work thing isn't just about productivity and getting ahead in the rat race, right? I feel like Newport is also hinting at a deeper meaning or satisfaction that comes with it.
You're picking up on something important. Newport connects deep work to the idea of craftsmanship.
And he uses the example of Rick Furr, a blacksmith, who finds a ton of satisfaction in his craft, right?
Yes. What's fascinating is that philosophers Hubert Dreyfus and Sean Dorrance-Kelly argue that the kind of satisfaction Furrer gets reflects a sense of the sacred that's deeply embedded in craftsmanship.
So it's not just about the job itself, but the way you approach the work that brings meaning.
Absolutely. Even work that might seem ordinary or routine, like a lot of knowledge work, can become a source of deep meaning when approached with that craftsman-like mindset. It's about bringing your full attention and skill to the task.
I love that. It's so empowering to think that you can find meaning in almost any kind of work if you have the right approach. So how do we actually develop this deep work mindset?
Yeah.
Newport has some practical rules for that, right?
He does, and he emphasizes that deep work is like a muscle that needs to be trained.
Like any skill, you don't just wake up one morning and suddenly know how to do it. It takes practice and effort.
Hmm.
Speaking of which, he uses the example of Adam Marlin, who developed incredible focus through intense Talmud study, right?
Right. Marlin is a great example of someone who intentionally built that mental capacity for deep work. It wasn't easy, but he was able to achieve remarkable results. And this leads us to Newport's 4 rules for cultivating deep work. Work deeply, embrace boredom, quit social media, and drain the shallows. Let's start with work deeply.
Okay, let's unpack that. What does it really mean to work deeply?
It's about consciously choosing a depth philosophy that works for you, not just trying to force yourself into a mold that doesn't fit. Newport outlines 4 different philosophies to get us started.
So there's not one right way to do this. It's more about finding what works best for your individual style and situation. Tell me about these different approaches.
The first one is the most extreme. It's called the monastic philosophy. This involves eliminating all distractions and shallow work as much as possible. Think of computer scientist Donald Knuth, who famously stopped using email altogether.
Wow, that takes serious commitment. I'm not sure I could give up email entirely. What are the other options?
Well, if going full monastic isn't feasible, there's the bimodal philosophy. This involves switching back and forth between periods of intense deep work and periods of more shallow collaborative work.
That sounds more doable, like Carl Jung, right? He'd retreat to his tower for deep thinking, but also had a bustling life in Zurich.
Exactly. He was able to balance both modes effectively. Then we have the rhythmic philosophy, which is all about establishing a regular routine for deep work, kind of like Jerry Seinfeld's famous daily writing habit.
Ah, the power of consistency. What's the last philosophy?
The last one is the journalistic philosophy, where you fit deep work into your schedule whenever you can, taking advantage of those pockets of time that open up.
Like Walter Isaacson. He somehow wrote his first book while also having a demanding job as a journalist.
Exactly. He'd squeeze in bursts of writing whenever he had a free moment. The key here is that there's no single right way to work deeply. It's about finding the approach that best suits your personality and your work.
So step one is figuring out which deep work philosophy resonates with you.
Mhm.
But how do you actually put it into practice? How do we embrace boredom, quit social media, and drain those shallows? I'm ready to hear more.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Cal Newport's deep work.
Last time we talked about how valuable this skill is becoming and explored why it can feel so hard to achieve in our distraction-filled world.
We also started to dig into the 4 different philosophies you can use to make deep work a bigger part of your life.
Right. But picking the right philosophy is just the first step. How do we actually make it happen?
That's where the remaining 3 rules come in. Embrace boredom, quit social media, and drain the shallows.
Okay, let's start with embrace boredom. I have to admit, that sounds a little counterintuitive, even scary.
Mm.
Don't we want our work to feel engaging and exciting?
Of course, we all want our work to be meaningful and fulfilling, but constantly chasing stimulation and novelty actually makes it harder to focus for long stretches of time.
So it's like we're training our brains to crave distractions instead of being able to settle into something that requires deep thought.
Exactly. Think of it like training for a marathon. You can't just expect to run 26 miles on your first try. You need to gradually build your endurance, pushing yourself a little further each time.
And you're saying it's the same with deep work. We need to train our minds to resist those tempting distractions and focus on the task at hand.
Precisely. You can start by setting small, achievable goals for those focused work sessions and slowly increase the time as you get more comfortable.
So it's a process, not an overnight transformation. Start small and build up that mental stamina over time.
Got it. Now, what about quitting social media? I think that's a tough one for a lot of us, myself included.
It definitely is. But Newport isn't suggesting we all become digital hermits. His point is to be more intentional about how we use social media. It's easy to fall into the trap of mindlessly scrolling without even thinking about why we're doing it.
It's about being honest with yourself about whether those platforms are actually serving you or just sucking up your time and attention, right?
Exactly. He has a really simple but effective strategy. First, figure out your main goals, both professional and personal. Then identify the activities that are truly essential for reaching those goals. And finally, this is the hard part, get rid of any social media platforms that don't directly support those activities. Wow, that would require some serious decluttering. But I can see how it would be so freeing to only use platforms that truly add value to your life. Okay, that brings us to drain the shallows. I'm picturing a swamp full of time-wasting tasks.
Well, I can definitely feel that way when we're drowning in shallow work. Emails, meetings, reports, all those things that keep us busy but don't really make a big difference in the long run.
So how do we drain the swamp, so to speak, and make space for deep work? Do you just cancel all your meetings and ignore your inbox?
Newport has a more structured approach. He suggests scheduling every minute of your day.
Wait, really? Every single minute? That sounds super rigid.
It might sound that way, but it's actually a powerful way to take control of your time and prioritize deep work. Instead of just reacting to whatever pops up, you're proactively deciding how you spend your precious hours.
It's like creating a budget, but for your time instead of your money. I like that.
Exactly. And when you do this, you'll start to see pockets of time that you can dedicate to deep work. You can also be more strategic about minimizing the time you spend on those less important tasks.
So deep work becomes a non-negotiable part of your day, not just something you try to squeeze in if you happen to have a few spare minutes. I'm starting to see how this all fits together. But what about those inevitable interruptions, those urgent requests that always seem to pop up at the worst possible time? How do you protect your deep work time?
That's such a great question because it happens to all of us. Newport offers some additional strategies for building boundaries and setting clear expectations so you're not constantly getting derailed.
Okay, give me the tips. I'm ready to defend my deep work time like a warrior guarding a treasure chest.
The first one is to use what he calls a sender filter for your email.
A sender filter. What is that?
It's simply a message in your email signature that explains that you only check email at certain times of day and that you won't be responding to messages outside of those times.
Well, that's clever. It lets people know not to expect an instant response from you, which can be a huge mental shift.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming control of your inbox and setting boundaries that respect your time and focus. Another tip is to be more thoughtful about how you process your email. Don't just react to every message the second it arrives.
So no more obsessively checking your inbox every 5 minutes. I'm guilty of that one.
It's a common habit, but it's not very efficient. Instead, schedule specific times for checking and responding to email. And when you do, don't just fire off quick replies. Take a few minutes to fully understand what's being asked and write a thorough response that addresses everything so you can truly close the loop.
It's about treating email like a project, not just an endless stream of interruptions. That makes a lot of sense. What's the last tip?
This one might sound radical, but it's so freeing. Don't feel obligated to respond to every email you receive. You have the right to choose which messages truly deserve your time and attention.
So it's okay to hit that delete button sometimes.
Absolutely. You're not being rude. You're being strategic about how you manage your time and energy. Remember, every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So by saying no to those distractions and those less important tasks, you're saying yes to the deep work that really matters.
That's such a good point. But what about those times when you're facing pressure from a boss or client who expects you to be constantly available? It can be hard to set those boundaries when you feel like you have to be on all the time.
That's where the final strategy comes in. Talking to your boss about your deep work goals.
Wait, are you saying we should actually sit down with our bosses and tell them we want to spend less time on email and more time on focused work? That feels a little intimidating.
It might seem daunting, but it's a crucial step in creating a work environment that truly supports deep work. And it doesn't have to be a confrontational conversation.
So how do you approach this conversation without causing a problem?
Start by asking your boss about their expectations for how you should be spending your time. What percentage of your time do they see you devoting to deep work versus shallow work? This can open up a dialogue about how you can best contribute to the team's goals. And if they say, oh, I expect you to be on email 24/7, well then, it might be time to start looking for a new job.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's a good sign that it's not the right fit. But I bet most bosses would at least be open to having that conversation. After all, they want their employees to be productive and engaged, right?
Exactly. It's about being proactive and creating a work environment where you can truly thrive. It's about aligning your personal goals with the goals of the company.
I love that. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Choosing a deep work philosophy, embracing boredom, getting strategic about social media, draining those shallows, and even having that sometimes difficult conversation with your boss. It's all starting to make sense now.
But we're not quite finished yet. Next time, we'll talk about how to apply something called the law of the vital few to our internet habits.
And we'll explore why it's actually good to be lazy sometimes. I can't wait to hear more about that.
Stay tuned for more practical insights and actionable strategies to help you harness the incredible power of deep work in your own life.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of deep work with Cal Newport.
It's been quite a journey exploring why this skill is so crucial in our modern age.
We've talked about everything from those 4 deep work philosophies to practical strategies for minimizing distractions and really reclaiming our time and attention. We even touched on the idea that boredom can actually be a good thing.
And last time we left off with a bit of a cliffhanger. We're going to dive into the law of the vital few and how it applies to our internet habits.
The law of the vital few. That rings a bell. Is that the same as the 80-20 rule?
It is. The idea is that roughly 80% of our results come from just 20% of our efforts. So it's about figuring out what those high-impact activities are and really focusing on those.
So how does this apply to all the different tools and platforms we use online? I'm thinking emails, social media news websites, the list goes on and on.
Well, the law of the vital few suggests that only a handful of those online tools are actually essential for achieving our goals. The rest are just distractions that eat up our time and energy without giving us much in return.
So it's about being ruthless and cutting out anything that's not truly serving us. Easier said than done.
It definitely takes discipline. Newport uses the examples of Malcolm Gladwell and Michael Lewis, both best-selling authors who have chosen not to use Twitter.
But isn't Twitter supposed to be a great way for writers to connect with their audience?
It can be, but for Gladwell and Lewis, the cost in terms of distraction and time simply outweighs the potential benefits. They've decided to focus their energy on the 20% of activities that really move the needle for them researching and writing.
So they're not anti-technology. They're just being strategic about which tools they use and how they use them.
Right. And they're not the only ones. Award-winning journalist George Packer also avoids Twitter. He even resisted getting a smartphone for years.
Wow, talk about commitment. So how do we apply this law to our own online lives? I'm ready for a digital detox.
Newport recommends a simple three-step process. First, identify your key professional and personal goals. Then, list the 2 or 3 most important activities that support each goal. These activities should be specific enough that you can actually picture yourself doing them, but general enough that you can sustain them over time.
Okay, so for example, if my goal is to write a book, my key activities might be writing every day, doing thorough research, and getting feedback from other writers.
Exactly. Once you have your key activities, it's time to evaluate each of those online tools you use and ask yourself, how well does this tool actually support those activities? If it doesn't make a significant contribution, it's probably a distraction that you can eliminate or at least minimize.
It's about aligning our tools with our goals and getting rid of anything that's not pulling its weight. Love it. But what about the other cliffhanger? You mentioned that it's good to be lazy sometimes. That sounds like the opposite of everything we've been talking about.
Well, not exactly. What Newport is advocating for is strategic laziness. It's about giving your mind time to rest and recharge, allowing your subconscious to work on those complex problems that you might be wrestling with.
So it's not about being unproductive. It's about being intentional about our downtime.
Precisely. He highlights 2 main benefits of downtime. First, it helps us restore the energy we need for deep work. It's like recharging our batteries. And second, it gives our unconscious mind the space to process information and make connections that our conscious mind might be missing.
That makes sense. When we're constantly on, our minds don't have the space to really think deeply and creatively. We need those moments of quiet reflection, those walks in nature, those times when we just let our minds wander.
Exactly. And this ties back to the importance of creating clear boundaries between work time and leisure time. Shut down completely at the end of the workday. Resist the urge to check email or work on projects during your downtime.
It's about giving your mind permission to relax and recharge so you can come back to your work feeling refreshed and focused. So by embracing strategic laziness, we're actually setting ourselves up for greater success when it's time to do deep work. It's a bit of a paradox, but I get it.
It is a paradox, and it's a reminder that deep work isn't just about pushing ourselves harder, it's also about working smarter. It's about creating a life that supports focus, creativity, and meaning.
I love that. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Cal Newport's deep work, we've explored why this skill is so valuable, especially in today's world. And we've learned practical strategies for making it a bigger part of our lives.
We've uncovered those 4 different deep work philosophies and discovered how even things like boredom and strategic laziness can actually be our allies in this journey.
It's all about making conscious choices about how we spend our time and energy, aligning our tools with our goals, and creating a life that allows us to do our best, most meaningful work. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, subscribe, leave a review, and share. Until next time, keep reading, growing, and stay curious.